Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Nikki to the conversation. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's lovely to see you. So just very briefly, I'll do an introduction. I'll let you do a proper introduction, Nikki. Let people know who you are, what you're doing, and then we'll get into the conversation. So Nikki and I met a couple of years ago at a mental health first aid training course. Nikki was a delegate on that course. And actually, we reconnected again recently for the refresher of that training. So it's lovely to see people who have taken their own journey through the discovery and journey of learning about mental health, supporting others through their mental health, and then coming back together to talk about it again. It was great to see Nikki, amazing story to share. So I'm not going to steal any of that or say anything about it, but just to say, Nikki, it's lovely. And thank you so much for agreeing to come on to the podcast to just have a chat about your journey. So welcome, introduce yourself properly.
Thank you. You are more than welcome. So I'm Nikki. I am, first and foremost, I am a parent to two wonderful mini adults, as I call them. They are almost 22 and 19. And on my day job, I am a personal assistant to a director. I look after his senior leadership team, and I'm an office coordinator for a team of about 100 people. So it's an exciting job. It's a wonderful company to work for. And I'm really honoured to be part of the wellbeing team, the mental health first aid team, and to generally look after people's wellbeing on a whole.
Brilliant stuff, and a great job that you do as well, of course. So that's the introductions out of the way. Now, the big part of this conversation. So I'm going to throw it over to you. Your journey, your story with mental health. I'd love to hear it. So please just let us know what you want to tell us.
All right. Okay. So I think I'm going to go back to the very beginning when I was born.
Okay.
And I talk about, when I do talks at work, I attend corporate inductions. I go and talk to people in group talks, team talks. I put blogs on our internal websites. And I always talk about statistics. And from the minute you're born, you become a statistic. You're given a number within society. And then you go to school, so you become a statistic at that school, junior school, secondary school, college, wherever you go. You might have braces along the journey. You might have glasses along the journey, and every time you do something, you become a number and a statistic. And then you grow up and you get married and you have children, and your children start the whole cycle of being statistics, and you get divorced, and all these things happen. You become a single parent. You might go to university as a mature student, which is what I did at the age of 34. Probably not one of the best decisions in my life, but I did it, and I got a degree in teaching. But I sat down one day and I was thinking about all these statistics, and we talk about bullying, we talk about divorce, we talk about people having braces, we talk about all these different things, single parents. We don't talk about mental health. It's always been a taboo subject. You don't hear someone on the train or the bus talking about their mental health journey, but you'll overhear them talking about their children's struggle with an eating disorder, or being bullied, or they're really upset because they have to wear glasses and they don't want to wear glasses, and that kind of thing. And it struck me when I first had my son, nearly 22 years ago, I suffered from postnatal depression, and there was no one to help me with that depression at the time. I went to my GP, I was given a form, and I ticked the boxes, and depending on what number score I got at the end, I was mildly depressed, or I was clinically depressed, and depending on where I fitted into that particular line of numbers would depend on what medication they gave me. But there was no counselling, there was no mental health first aid, there was no one to support me, there was no one for me to turn to. And because mental health was such a taboo subject, I went in on myself, and I really struggled until I fell pregnant with my daughter 2.5 years later. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with her that all my postnatal depression symptoms disappeared. Also, I thought. And I never struggled with depression. I went through a divorce, I became a single parent, I had 2 children under the age of 5, I had 2 dogs, I had 2 horses, I was working 3 jobs, I went back to university, so I had all this going on in my life, and I still wasn't depressed. I was in a happy place. I was doing great. I had a lovely job well, 3 jobs that I really enjoyed doing, and I was in a really happy place. And then I broke my leg about 3 years ago. I'd not long come out of a fairly abusive relationship, and it was emotionally abusive, but I was still buoyant. I was still happy. I was still winning. And I'd come out of, and from my point of view, it was time for me to start living my life again as me, and to find out who I was as a person and as an adult, and not just mum anymore, not just the PA, not just the dog owner, me, Nikki. And I just started going out and getting a social life again, and reconnecting with all my friends who I'd lost contact with throughout that abusive relationship. And I took the dogs for a walk, and I fell down a rabbit hole. And I became another statistic, because I then had to go to hospital, and I was put on, I was a number because I was in hospital. I'd broken my leg. I'm pretty sure I'm the only person that's visited Basingstoke Hospital with a broken leg because they've fallen down a rabbit hole. But that's how I did it. And I was fine. I came home, I sat on the sofa, I cried, I was in pain, but I was still quite happy and buoyant, because at the end of the day, it could have been a lot worse. And it was just a broken ankle. Okay. I was on really strong painkillers. I was doing really, really well. And I overheard a conversation that my daughter was having with one of her friends, and she described me as a burden. Right. So this 44-year-old woman who was totally independent, split second, lost her independence, lost her social life that she just started to regain. What I had gained was a massive supply of really strong painkillers. And all I heard was burden. And I didn't want to be a burden on my family. And I couldn't put any weight on my leg at the time. So I literally had a backpack with all my drugs, all my water, everything that I needed for the night, my phone, the charger and everything. And I'd hauled myself up the stairs, and I got to the top of the stairs, and I burst into tears, and I took all the tablets out of my backpack. I didn't even have the energy to get onto my bed and take them on my bed. I was sat on the landing, and I was about to take the whole box of these really strong painkillers. And a split second, my puppy came up, and she was probably about 14, 15 weeks old at this time. So I had this puppy that was dependent on me as well at the time, and I couldn't walk her. And she came up, and she literally just bounced up at me, and she sat on my lap, and she just gave me this biggest, wettest, slobberiest kiss ever. And it was that split second that I thought, I can't do this. I need to be here to tell people how low I got, to prevent them hopefully getting into that same position, and preventing them from doing what I almost did. And I am so thankful to have that dog every day for coming up at that moment in time, because if she'd been a minute later or 10 minutes later, I wouldn't be here to tell you my story. And that was the point where I then started looking into becoming a mental health first aider. And at the time, our company didn't have a program to do it. So I looked at other areas to do it, Mental Health First Aid England, St John's Ambulance. And then there was a program at work, and I jumped on it, and I volunteered to do it. And it was probably one of the best things I've ever done, because I have helped a number of people at work and a number of my friends understand different issues with mental health and poor mental health. And I've been able to give them coping mechanisms and just talk to them and just listen, which is the most important thing. And it's that listening, and it's just knowing that someone is there if you need them, which is the most important thing ever. And I'm so grateful for Mental Health First Aid England for allowing me to do the course. I'm grateful for my company for having the confidence in me to allow me to join the mental health first aid community and the wellbeing community. And I think I'm always very open and honest about my story. Like I said, I do company inductions, and I will tell them my story. Okay. And my philosophy is, I can't expect you to talk to me if I'm not open with you. So I will be open, I will be honest, and I will tell you every step of my journey, in the hope that if you feel comfortable with me talking about my journey, you will then feel confident enough to open up, even if it's just a little bit, just to show me a snippet of your story for me to then be able to help you and listen. And I think beyond being a mum, beyond being a PA, beyond being a friend, beyond being a daughter and a sister and an auntie and all of those things, I still think that being a mental health first aider is probably one of the most valuable things I have ever done in my life.
Right. Amazing.
That's me.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I'm just taking everything in and just thinking about all the things you've just said, because you've said some amazing things, you know, thinking about going to that very, very low, dark space, right? Where you are now, in the way that you see and interpret this conversation of mental health in a different way, because ultimately that's what you're explaining. You know, it's sort of, you hadn't really had to think about it too much before, apart from you'd had a few parts in there, the postnatal depression and so on. Can I go to that point actually? Can I sort of break down a few of these parts? Because obviously for people listening, you know, you've covered a lot of things, and I do want to make sure we give each one sort of a little bit of more depth, if that's okay. The postnatal depression, when you had your son 20 plus years ago, so it's a long way back in terms of sort of memories. You've had a lot of memories since then, of course. Connecting to those feelings, what was going on for you when you were experiencing postnatal depression? How were you feeling at the time?
I think the biggest feeling I had at the time was of failure.
Right.
That I'd always wanted to be a mum, and I'd always said that I wanted to have my children when I was young. So I was only 23 when I fell pregnant.
Okay.
But for me, it was really important that I had my children when I was young, and young enough to enjoy them when they were children. So now at 47, they're 22 and 19. They've got their own lives, and I'm still young enough to still have a life of my own and rebuild a life and rebuild my identity as Nikki, not mum anymore. I'm Nikki now. But I just felt such a failure, because I had nurtured this baby inside me for 9 months, and I had the most horrendous of births, which didn't help. And he was rushed off to special care unit for 3 days, and I couldn't see him. I couldn't hold him, and I felt like I'd failed him as well. And it was just this overwhelming feeling of hatred towards myself in a way. I kept thinking, I've brought this beautiful baby into the world, and he's poorly, and I can't do anything about it. And I was stuck in a hotel room on my own. Hospital. I wish it was a hotel. It's like this hospital room on my own, and you've got all these thoughts going around in your head, and I couldn't go and see him, and I just wanted to know that he was okay. I just wanted to cuddle him, and I just felt an overwhelming failure. I genuinely did. And because he was still quite poorly when we brought him home, I just felt like I was letting him down. And I felt like I'd let my husband down, because I was the one that wanted the children so early, and he was having to look after him more than planned, because I just could not look after him.
Did you have other supports around you then? Obviously your husband was there, but anybody else that you could turn to at the time, or what was that?
My parents lived quite a number of miles away, so and my mum's not the most confident of drivers, so it was very difficult for my mum to come and see me. So I would have to make the effort to get into the car and make sure that I had everything for the day and go and see her. And when I got there, I didn't want to talk about how I was feeling. I wanted to do anything other than talk about how I was feeling or how ill my son was. And I had some great friends around, but there was no medical care. It literally was, here's some tablets, come back in a month and tell us how you're doing, and we'll review you in 4 months, 6 months, or whatever it was. And they were quite happy to pack you off with a big bag of antidepressants and, you know, knock yourself out kind of thing.
Quite literally, unfortunately, isn't it?
Well,
knock yourself out, whatever. Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, you know, you come through that crisis, and you had your daughter as well. So, you know, do you really feel that was the transition that you needed to have? And how did that close?
Definitely.
How did that close the transition from the postnatal depression piece?
I don't think it ever did until I
Okay.
fell pregnant with my daughter.
Right.
And then I had something to sort of look forward to again. And I had this new life to sort of concentrate on.
Okay.
And, you know, my son was getting a little sister, and the family was growing, and we were making plans for holidays and all sorts of things. And, you know, he was going off to toddler groups, and it was an exciting time. And I was looking forward again. And I think that's when my depression got put to the back of my mind, and it never really surfaced again until 3 years ago.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? So such a long period as well, where it wasn't there, it wasn't present so much. Do you think there might have been moments in that journey in between that it showed itself at all? I know you've been through quite a few other things as well in personal situations, but
I think I definitely had sad times. I definitely had low points in my life. I don't think at any point between having my daughter and 3 years ago that I would say that I was depressed, to the point where I would go and seek medical help.
Yeah.
And I think I guess I was one of the lucky ones. It never sort of bubbled up and sort of came to the surface. It was always quite dormant, and I never thought about it.
Yeah.
I talked about having postnatal depression, but I never really thought about being depressed between having my daughter and breaking my leg.
No, it's interesting. You know, one of the big things that we talk about a lot in the mental health space in the training is self-awareness, you know, having the ability to then recognize, you know, but obviously we're talking about in the past often, aren't we? So it's some things that have happened. So we can look at them and reflect on them and think, oh, actually, no, that was maybe some signs that there was, like you say, some sadness or some low mood, or maybe you lost interest in some of the things you normally enjoy, some of those signs. So I want to bring us to that point then of 3 years ago, and if that's okay, just talk about that just a little bit, because obviously there was a physical injury, right? So this is something that we often don't connect, and I think this is a really useful sort of exploration for listeners, for those who wouldn't always consider that a physical injury transmits itself or transposes itself into a mental health challenge, right? A big mental health challenge. So was there moments before you got to that point where you heard that word burden, and then you thought, what's the point? I might as well just, do what we were going to do. Was there anywhere in that middle piece where you started to feel the depression coming back? Was there anything that started to show itself again, or what was going on?
It was probably about a week after I actually broke my ankle.
Right.
I was sitting on the sofa, and I'm a very independent woman. You know, I will only ask people for help if it's genuinely something I cannot physically do myself, or I don't have the resource or the ability to do it. So I will always try and find a solution to fix something myself or do something myself. And I was on the sofa, and it was probably like day 7 or 8, and I was still in pain, and I was watching reruns of some rubbish TV, because daytime TV is not great, is it? Let's just admit it.
I would never know.
I have to say, I have not watched an episode of This Morning since I went back to work. So I think it was around day 7 or day 8, and I looked across my sort of lounge, and the floor hadn't been swept for a few days, and there was a bunch of flowers that the people from work had kindly sent me as a get well, and they were sort of dying and petals falling off. And normally I would just jump up and grab the hoover or pick the flowers up and put them out the bin or anything, but I couldn't even physically get out the back door because there's quite a big step, and if I got out I wouldn't be able to get back in again, so couldn't even put the flowers outside. And I think that's when it started to creep in very slowly, almost like a sort of a dripping tap, really. And it just seemed to get a bit worse each day. And I hired a cleaner, and she would come in and she would be absolutely amazing, but she didn't do the cleaning the way I do the cleaning. So that was an irritant to me, because it wasn't, I say up to my standards. It was just different. It was, everybody has different ways of doing things, and it wasn't my way of doing things. And that frustrated me. And because I couldn't fix it, I got even more frustrated. I couldn't cook dinner. I couldn't feed the dogs, I couldn't take them for a walk, I couldn't drive. But, you know, I had my best friend, bless her, she would come around once a week and she would take me to the pub for lunch, which was brilliant. But the other 6.5 days, I was just on the sofa. The kids were out pretty much all the day. It was just me and Phil and Holly. And I think it just trickled in, and then it crept up on me. And before I knew it, I was in this situation where I was hearing that I was a burden. Kids didn't want to be at home because I was asking them to do things that they didn't necessarily want to do, and I was getting angry because I couldn't do it, and then I was getting angry at them because they weren't doing it for me. And I think I just genuinely snapped. I think my well of tolerance just overran, and that was the point where I thought, what's the point? I'm not me anymore. I'm not the mum. I'm not Nikki. I'm this shell of a woman that I used to be. And I was just so frustrated by it. I genuinely thought, what's the point?
So that moment of clarity came, you know, when things changed, when the puppy arrived and you know, the life-saving puppy, right? Quite literally.
She is.
What happened after that? So I'm intrigued, because obviously, you know, you've gone from being in crisis, which you were in crisis at that point, right? And that's what was going on, to then doing something differently. What happened? Did you talk to somebody? Did you reach out to somebody? Did you just keep it bottled up? How did you do with that?
Initially I burst into tears.
Okay.
I sobbed, and I don't think I've ever cried to the point where I literally had no tears to cry. There was nothing else coming out. I was just sobbing. And all the time, the puppy Willow, she was next to me, and she just did not leave my side. And and again, it was like a light bulb switched on. I've gone from this something that snapped inside me that just wants to end it, to this light bulb moment coming on and thinking, I can't do it. I still have children who you know, they are dependent on me, even though I felt like I was being a burden, and I'd heard that I was being a burden. They were still dependent on me, and even now at the ages they are, to a certain degree, they still are, and they always will be, because that's parenthood. And I went back downstairs and I made myself a cup of coffee, and I pulled myself together, and I reapplied my mascara, and I sat on the sofa and I plonked my leg up on the cushion, and I just sat with my cup of coffee in silence with my puppy on the sofa next to me. And I actually spoke to myself, and I swore at myself, and I said, what are you doing? What were you thinking? And I called myself all the names under the sun. You know, I was ridiculous, I was stupid, I was selfish. And I said, how dare you even think about that? You have a life, you have a family. And then I started to feel guilty, because if I had done it, it would have been one of my children that would have found me at the top of the stairs. And then how would my parents react? How would my brothers react? How would my friends react? And I felt incredibly guilty, not sorry for myself, just guilty that I even thought about letting down all these people who are my friends and family and loved ones.
Yeah, so true. So interesting insights. I'm fascinated, Nikki, by the way that you're sort of putting this together and showing sort of the reality. And thank you for opening up so openly, or you know, to share all this with us as well. Who was the first person you told about this? Who did you speak to first? Because obviously you talk openly about it now, but who was it, and how did that conversation go?
The first person I told was during my mental health first aid training.
Right. Okay. Right.
And so I broke my ankle in the May, and I had my training in the following February.
Okay.
And I kept it to myself. I felt so ashamed. I didn't want to tell anybody, but I knew I had to do something, and I knew I had to help other people. And I knew I had to get my story out there to help other people. And the best way I could do it was to do the mental health first aid training and be open and honest. Mm-hmm. And I cried, because it was the first time I'd told anybody. It was emotional. I was absolutely overwhelmed with the experience of sharing my journey. Yeah. But that made it so much easier to then go on and talk about it in induction forums and team talks and you know, department briefings, and now, I mean, I think I've come so far since that day, and I've accepted it. I've accepted who I am, and I don't feel guilty anymore. I don't feel ashamed. I don't feel that I did anything wrong, because at the time I didn't, and I genuinely didn't think I was doing anything wrong. But I am so grateful that I didn't do it, and that I am able to tell people, and hopefully by telling my story, people will feel that they can talk about their story.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that they don't do what I did and keep it bottled up for however many months, and they do talk to somebody. And if I can get one person to open up and talk to somebody about it, then the last 2.5 years of the training and the advice and support that I've given people will have paid off.
Yep. And I can say 100% that I'm very happy that you didn't do it as well. I think it's
Thank
just
you.
amazing. You're amazing. You really are. And you know, you're very humble with your approach to this and the conversation. And you know, you're a wonderful advocate of mental health, and just what you've been through, the experiences. And yeah, it is emotional when you share it. It isn't, you know, it's real. It's not pretend, you know, it's something that you really had as an experience in your own world. And yet you should never feel ashamed of that. And you said that you should never feel any shame towards.
Never.
When you're feeling low, sometimes we make decisions or we choose options that might not be so good for us, but having the ability to come out of those is just incredible. We've got a couple more minutes, we don't have much more time, but I do just want to ask one very quick question. When you talk about your story, right now, I heard you talking about this a few weeks ago when we were together. When you tell people your story, what's the reaction that people give you? How do people react to that?
Oh, I think they're appreciative, because I've told them my story, and they always say thank you for sharing. And because I am in the position where I am in the company, and I have quite a respectable and responsible position within the company, people see me as a really strong, independent woman.
Yeah.
And they would never for 1 minute imagine that what I've been through is part of me. They look at me and they go, really? Would never have believed you, never have thought. And I think because I'm happy, I walk in the office when we can go in the office. I walk in the office and I'm always really happy and bubbly, and they're always like, why are you so happy? And I am the happy one. I'm the one that cracks the jokes, and I'm quite loud in the office, and you know, but they always say it's the ones that are the outgoing ones and the happy ones and the smiley ones are the ones that have the biggest or the hardest hitting stories behind them. And I think that's true.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree. Yeah, I get it. I do. You know, I do. You know, I understand that. And I think
they try and overcompensate. And I'm not saying I overcompensate, because I am me. I behave the way I am. I act the way I am. I laugh when I find something funny, or I tell someone off when I think something's not funny or rude or something.
So, if laughter and happiness is an indicator that somebody's got a story behind it, maybe it's time we start hearing the story, right? That's the thing. And that's what this is about, really. You know, it's about recognizing it's not as easy as sort of just looking at somebody and saying, well, they're okay, they're not okay. It's not that easy. We put masks over it, but listening to people, so I just love hearing your story, Nikki, and I just found it absolutely fascinating. We are coming towards the end, so I will throw it over to you in a second. Any final thoughts, insights, words of wisdom that you wish to share? It's always like the Jerry Springer ending, which is, you know, over to those final thoughts. But I just want to say a huge thank you from me to you.
You are more than welcome.
You know, when I heard your story a few weeks ago, as I said, I just was like, oh my God, I want you on my podcast. I want you on here to listen or to share your story for others to listen to as well. And that's one of my drivers for all of this, is when I hear something, I'm like, oh my God, this has got to get out there. We've got to share this. So thank you so much for that. So final thoughts, you.
Oh, wow. Well, firstly, thank you very much for allowing me to do the podcast and telling everybody my story. But I think more importantly, I would just urge anybody that is feeling a little bit low or a little bit unhappy, a little bit sad, talk to somebody, anybody, just talk to somebody and tell them how you're feeling. And if you can't talk to a friend or family, you know, there are so many charities out there that will listen to you. You know, so many charities. And I just want people to open up. I want to stop mental health issues being such a massive stigma. And I want I want people to open it. I want to be able to talk about it on the train. I want to be able to hear people talking about it in the supermarket, and that would be the ideal world for me. So please don't hold it in, let it out. It feels so much better when you talk about it.
Brilliant. Oh, seriously, what great insights, what great thoughts. You know, we're not just statistics, are we?
We're not just statistics, Matt.
I heard you at the beginning, although there's many. You know what? You can't take the statistics out of me. I love statistics. But it is so important, everything you've just said. There are many organizations out there today that exist to help these conversations. And also in your own organization, just a shameless plug here, if you do have mental health first aiders, that's the role of a mental health first aider, is to provide a listening support, to provide a safe space to talk. And, you know, I've had the great pleasure of training Nikki and your colleagues within your business. And, you know, if anybody wants to train with me, get in touch. Nikki's a great reference if you want to know more about my training style. But yeah, fantastic stuff, Nikki. Thank you so much. I really do genuinely appreciate you participating. Just to close, if anybody is struggling, if you do worry about anything, if you've got any concerns, any of the points that Nikki's raised in her sort of story, her journey, if you want to ask anything, please do feel free to reach out. Nikki's accessible. I'm accessible. That's the purpose of this, is to make sure people know you can talk to real people that have been through real experiences as well. If you're struggling, you need a safe space. Samaritans exist today to provide that safe space. If you need that place to just reach out and talk, call 116 123. If you don't like calling, you prefer to do a bit of texting or messaging, you can contact on Shout 85258. I'll make sure I get the number right, 85258. And there are many other organizations out there as well. You are not alone. For you listening out there in big podcasts and YouTube lands, you're not alone. Please know that. There is always somebody out there that cares. Talking as soon as you start to feel those worries, those concerns, is really helpful. It really is. Nikki, it's been amazing. I'm so happy that we've had the opportunity to sit down and do this. And I just wish you all the very best for the future. Good luck being a mental health advocate, mental health first aider, and keep on flying the flags for mental health, positive mental health.
Thanks, Matt.
Oh, you're welcome. See you soon.